CAFCASS, a name that comes up again and again in the UK family court system. They operate at the heart of some of the most emotionally charged legal battles in the country: custody disputes, care proceedings, private family law cases. And yet, unless you've been through the system yourself, you might never have heard of them. But for the families caught in the machinery of family courts, CAFCASS can be a defining force. Sometimes a lifesaver, sometimes a destroyer. Welcome back to On the Verge YouTube channel, and today we're diving into who they are, or who CAFCASS are, what they do, and why so many people are asking the question: is CAFCASS truly fit for purpose? So let's start with, what is CAFCASS? We'll start from the beginning. CAFCASS, which actually stands for Children and Family Court Advisory and Support Service, was established on April the 1st, 2001, under the Criminal Justice and Court Services Act 2000. Ironically, on April Fool's Day, but we'll get into that. Its job? To look after the interests of children involved in family proceedings. CAFCASS operates independently of the courts, social services, education and health authorities. They are the voice of the child, at least that's the aim. Their core purpose is to safeguard and promote the welfare of children in family court cases, ensuring that children are heard and that decisions made by judges are informed by the best possible understanding of a child's needs. Now, what do CAFCASS do? In theory, this is vital work. Children can't always articulate what they want or what they need, especially when caught between separating parents, allegations of abuse or uncertain care situations. CAFCASS practitioners, many of whom are qualified social workers, step in to assess the family dynamics, speak to the child or children, review background reports, and make recommendations to the court about what's in the child's best interest. They may suggest who a child should live with, how contact should work, or if safeguarding concerns mean certain people should be kept away entirely. Excuse me. Now, on paper, that sounds like exactly the kind of structure you'd want: thoughtful, impartial, professional. But here's where things start to unravel. Because for every case where CAFCASS has helped safeguard a vulnerable child or mediate a toxic dispute, there's another story. A story which is raw, painful, and real, of families who feel deeply harmed by their involvement. So you have the critics. Critics say CAFCASS holds immense power with very little oversight. Their reports are heavily weighted by the courts. Their opinions can shape the course of a child's life. And yet, many families feel they've been misunderstood, misrepresented, or outright dismissed by CAFCASS officers who either don't take the time to fully understand the situation or bring their own biases into the process. There are countless testimonies from parents who say CAFCASS ignored evidence of abuse, downplayed risk, or treated protective parents as hostile simply for raising concerns. Domestic abuse survivors in particular have been raising the alarm for years. One of the most consistent criticisms is that CAFCASS applies an overly simplistic model of co-parenting, pushing for contact with both parents at all costs, even when one parent poses a genuine danger. This approach has led to horrifying consequences. In 2020, the Ministry of Justice released a damning report into how the family courts handle domestic abuse cases. One of the findings was that professionals, including those from CAFCASS, often failed to spot coercive control and were too quick to promote contact between children and abusive parents. The report also stated that the system is slanted in favour of contact at all costs, the phrase that has since become a rallying cry for campaigners. Let's be clear, when CAFCASS gets it wrong, the outcomes can be devastating. There are cases where children have been placed with abusive parents against the wishes of the protective parent. There are cases where children were removed from loving homes because the CAFCASS officer believed the parent was alienating the other. Another controversial term that many argue is weaponized against survivors of abuse. Now, the criticism of CAFCASS, let's go down that road now, because it's not just about cases where CAFCASS face criticism. There are concerns about delay, inconsistency, and the quality of assessments. In 2018, a report from Ofsted graded CAFCASS as outstanding, which was met with disbelief by many service users who described a different reality. Rushed interviews, factual errors in reports, and conclusions that bore no resemblance to the actual evidence. Now, social media groups, forums, and petitions are overflowing with complaints about CAFCASS. Parents say their voices were not heard. Children's feelings were ignored. Sometimes it feels like the very organisation set up to protect children is contributing to their harm. And what's worse, CAFCASS officers are rarely held accountable for mistakes. There is no meaningful appeal process for families. Even when complaints are upheld, there are few consequences. It creates a culture where families feel powerless, silenced, and betrayed. And again, we'll go further into that later on. So how did we get here with CAFCASS? Well, part of the problem lies in the scale of the challenge CAFCASS is facing. With tens of thousands of cases each year and chronic underfunding, many CAFCASS officers are stretched thin. Some are handling caseloads that would be considered unmanageable in any other profession. There's also a recruitment crisis in social work, which affects the caliber and stability of the workforce. When you combine heavy workloads, limited training, and systemic pressure to clear backlogs, it's a recipe for a rushed assessments and burnt out professionals. Social workers on average only last 2 years. But that doesn't excuse harm. If anything, it makes the case even stronger for urgent reform. We need to ask whether an organisation with such significant influence over children's lives should be allowed to operate with so little external scrutiny. Is it time to introduce genuine independent oversight? Should there be a mechanism for families to challenge decisions? Should CAFCASS officers be legally accountable when their actions lead to harm? Well, I think so. There are growing calls for a public inquiry into the family courts, and CAFCASS is squarely in the crosshairs. Activists, lawyers, psychologists, and parents are demanding change, not because they want to tear down the system, but because they want it to work better for children, for safety, for justice. Let's also consider the legal frameworks that CAFCASS operates within. Family courts are bound by the Children Act 1989, which places the welfare of the child as the paramount concern. CAFCASS is meant to support that principle, but too often procedural concerns seem to take precedence over the nuanced, messy, emotionally reality of family breakdowns. The courts want quick answers. CAFCASS is under pressure to deliver fast reports. And in that rush, complexity is flattened. Children become case files. Parents become caricatures. So are all CAFCASS officers the same? Look, it's important to note that not all CAFCASS officers are the same. There are practitioners who go above and beyond, who really listen, who challenge poor practice, and who do make a difference. There are families who are deeply grateful for their support, but these positive stories don't negate the structural issues. A system can produce good outcomes occasionally and still be deeply flawed. One of the most controversial topics around CAFCASS is the concept of parental alienation. Originally coined to describe situations where one parent actively undermines the child's relationship with the other. It's become a toxic flashpoint in family law. Critics argue that it is frequently used to discredit allegations of abuse. In some cases, children who express fear or reluctance to see a parent are assumed to be alienating, rather than listened to. CAFCASS's embrace of this concept has caused alarm among child protection experts who say it can be misapplied with dangerous results. There's also the question of diversity and inclusion. How well does CAFCASS understand the cultural and socio-economic context of the families they serve? There are concerns that Black and minority ethnic families face disproportionate scrutiny, and that neurodivergent children are often misunderstood. Trauma, disability, language barriers, all of these need to be carefully considered in family assessments. But families report that these factors are often brushed aside. Well, so is CAFCASS actually fit for purpose? Where do we go from here? Is CAFCASS fit for purpose? Right now, it depends on who you ask. Supporters say the organisation is trying to do an impossible job with limited resources. Critics say those excuses are no longer acceptable. In a just society, no child should be harmed by the very system meant to protect them. Reform is not a luxury, it's a necessity. We need better training for officers, especially around domestic abuse, neurodiversity, and trauma. We need fewer cases per practitioner so they can do their job thoroughly. We need clearer accountability structures, independent oversight, and a genuine way for families to challenge decisions. We need transparency in how decisions are made. And above all, we need to remember that these aren't just cases. These are real children, real families, and real lives. What you also have to take into account is in some countries, child welfare advocates have more power to hold the system to account. In some jurisdictions, children's voices are heard through child advocates who have specialist training in child development and trauma. Maybe it's time the UK considered a new model, one where CAFCASS isn't the only voice in the room and where children's needs aren't filtered through bureaucracy and overwork. Should CAFCASS officers be held accountable in a court of law? That's a complex question. Certainly, if negligence or misconduct leads to harm, there must be consequences. However, if a parent challenges a CAFCASS report in court, but the judge accepts the report without question, CAFCASS is not required to attend or provide further explanation. How does that work out? This can undermine a parent's right to a fair hearing under Article 6 of the Human Rights Act and often forces parents into lengthy and difficult appeals processes to seek justice. But the solution isn't just individual accountability, it's systemic reform. If we focus only on punishing bad actors, we miss the deeper truth that the entire system needs rebuilding with compassion, with rigour, with justice. Now, for a lot of you that have been watching the YouTube channel that are subscribed, you know we get to the final thoughts. I'll give you my final thoughts. At the heart of CAFCASS is an undeniable truth. It was built with a purpose that matters, to safeguard children, to uphold their voices, to help families navigate some of the most painful chapters of their lives with dignity and care. And in many cases, dedicated individuals within CAFCASS work tirelessly to do just that. But noble intentions do not cancel out harmful outcomes. Too often we hear stories of children silenced or survivors disbelieved, or vulnerable parents re-traumatized by a system that was supposed to protect them. These aren't isolated incidents. They reflect systemic issues that demand attention, transparency, and reform. So the question is not whether CAFCASS should exist. The question is whether it is fit for purpose in its current form, and whether it is being held to account when it fails. Because where there is power over children's lives, there must be accountability. And where there is harm, there must be redress. We cannot keep telling families to put their faith in a system that may not deserve it. If CAFCASS is to continue playing a central role in family justice, it must evolve. Not behind closed doors, but in partnership with the very people it serves. survivors, children, parents, advocates. We need independent oversight, cultural change, training that reflects the complexities of abuse and neurodiversity, and above all, a system that values humanity over bureaucracy. Only then can CAFCASS truly claim to be a voice for children and not just another cog in the machinery of a broken system. Until then, scrutiny is not just fair, it's essential. So the next time you hear someone talk about CAFCASS, don't just nod and move on like I once did. Ask questions, listen to stories, push for better, because a society can be judged by how it treats its most vulnerable. And right now, too many children and families are falling through the cracks. If you've had experiences of CAFCASS, good or bad, share your story in the comments. Give it a like and a share with those people that need to hear this. This conversation needs your voice. And don't forget to subscribe, because we're just getting started. Until next time, take care.